Good morning, everyone. We have a very diverse set of people today, to game developers, we have academia and industry professionals. So we could have like a healthy discussion. And you guys feel free to ask each other questions. I don't have to moderate everything. But, we can start off by, I would love to hear, why are you in video gaming industry or creative industry? What kind of educational background do you have which inspired you to be in this space to start off? Robbie, do you want to go first?
So, I guess my name is Robbie. I was a backend engineer for about 10 years, from 99 till about 2008. 2008, I got married and I made the mistake of buying my wife an iPhone 1. And that doesn't work in India. So hacked it, unlocked it. And I think officially I was the first iPhone developer in the country back in 2008. Launched a game called Tap to Learn in 2010. We launched it around the same time, May, June, and it went to top 5 grossing worldwide. So that's kind of how we made our mark, and we realized that what the App Store had solved for us was really distribution. So whatever you were thinking of making could be distributed. On the first day we had 900 paid installs. Second day we had 10,000. That kind of changed the trajectory of whatever we were making, because then we realized that now whatever software we were making found distribution. Went to Y Combinator, learned working with every large game studio in the Silicon Valley. Learned how to make games, came back in 2014 and started Super Gaming. So essentially made real-time multiplayer shooters now for the last 10 years. That's really my background. From a company perspective, our story is better known as Three Guys, a Dog and a Dream. That's really our studio. I was teaching at the University of Pune, taught there for 12 years while working, and kind of found my co-founders there. So essentially, all the early members at Super Gaming, or at June as our company is called, were actually students of mine.
Yeah, so I'm a little odd man out in this group. Okay, so more coming from the academia side of it. To answer your question, probably to stay young, okay. I see this is the future as far as, so because I work on 2 domain areas. One is the gaming side of it, and the one is the XR and XT side of it. Okay, so very closely associated with the XT, which is the Experiential Technology Innovation Center at IIT Madras, wherein we do work with bridging a lot of things around the new world of XR. So the new things are the ones which fascinates me, and that's one area where I wanted to always be there. Been all the 27 years of my experience been associated with the academia, trying to do something more passionate to the student community, and that brings me here.
I joined NASSCOM very early. I had just graduated, did my bachelor's in commerce, and I just started at NASSCOM. And at that time, and I remember Vishal and Rajesh and all had actually got consoles and computers to show what video games is all about in 2003, when NASSCOM launched the Animation and Gaming Report. And that was my first introduction to that India is also doing game development, because we would play games but had no idea that India was building games. And 2003 is when I got introduced to this industry, and I fell in love with it. Come 2005 onwards at NASSCOM, we started the NASSCOM Games Animation Games Initiative to put exactly where animation and games industry on the global footprint, just like how we did for the tech industry. So that was the introduction, and from there the journey has been a great journey so far. It's been 20 years plus, and no complaints.
Yeah, so I started I started my gaming journey in the 80s. So I'm like dating myself. The first game I played was Parsec on a Texas Instrument TI-99, which is a glorified calculator, 16 kilobytes of RAM. That was, and then upgraded myself to a VIC-20 in a Commodore 64. So if any one of you know and remember Commodore 64, okay, anyway. I started work, my first job was really, I was with Atari. And I guess similarly to your story, it was kind of a bit of an accident. I studied music, and I wasn't particularly good at it in comparison to my peers. I grew up in Vienna, in Austria, and I wrote one of the very first MIDI software, which is basically a plugin that allows you basically to compose music on a keyboard. And the Atari ST had MIDI ports, and these MIDI ports could be connected to a very primitive keyboard, which was easy to compose for me. And this was in '85. My teacher was not impressed at all. This was a time when calculators were not allowed in class, right? Never mind a computer to help you compose. But I uploaded the software onto a pre-internet service called CompuServe. Again, I don't know how many people remember CompuServe. There we go. Okay, same generation. And back then there were only a couple 100,000 users. It was pre-internet, but I uploaded the software, and it was kind of interesting because I was really just a teenager, and people started to appreciate the software. And as a Chinese person in Austria, there weren't that many of us. And it kind of didn't matter, though, in that environment, what you looked like, where you were from, all that type of stuff. So all the benefits of being online and being connected. And people from America started sending me checks, because we didn't have PayPal, right? And that was actually what happened. The whole shareware public domain software industry was based on, we like your software. And you would completely disclose your home address, by the way. Right? This is just totally normal back then, right? You put that in there, and then they would send it to your home, and I basically literally received money in the mail, and I didn't have a bank account. So that was my beginning. And then Atari reached out and said, we like your software. And I walk in, and they're like, wait, you're a kid. I still got the job. And I think we see this parallel story, and that was how I got into the gaming industry, because Atari was a gaming company. But that's kind of the parallel story that I see in all industries that are emerging, whether it's websites, whether it's blockchain, it doesn't really matter. If you have a skill or capability, if you're early, it doesn't matter sort of who you are, how old you are, you have that sort of emergent opportunity, and you can grow from that. That led me to the US, because I got a formal computer science education. Atari went under in the way that it was, and then we started doing stuff for SGI, Silicon Graphics, another one that's not here anymore. But if you watch old Star Wars movies, they were all run with SGI machines. And we were working on this early thing called VRML. And so VRML was basically HTML, but for VR. So it literally stood for Virtual Reality Markup Language. It was Tron-like line graphics, but that basically got me into the entire sort of, let's call it, they used to call it multimedia back then, sort of industry. I mean, that term is all dead, pretty much, I would say. But that's how it started, and my love for gaming and virtual reality, really, and sort of digital reality really started with I guess my introduction to the space.
Yeah, I mean, almost everybody. I mean, I have a similar story too, which is I hustled my way into a job. I was a decent programmer, and that company got like a big video game to build, and none of us ever really played games back then. But I did pretend that I played, and so that I could be the lead on that. I screwed up that project, obviously, but but at least that's how I got into it, and I fell in love with the industry. This was in 90s, not 80s, but in 90s. But I wish there were a few things I was told when I was starting my career. Like, I mean, if you were gonna do all what you did all over again, what would be an advice you would have given yourself? I would love to hear from Robbie and Yet. Like one key thing you wish you knew before you started getting into video gaming or becoming a video game developer. What would have that been from a skill point of view?
I think, today with the internet and the way the people are learning, earlier in our company, the story of our company is that we started in a small bungalow in Vimannagar, and we literally say that we used to hire trespassers. So we started there, but today everybody that walks in already knows his stuff. He probably walks in with a project that's already live, with something that's already running. So I do think that self-learning is kind of really taken off from a perspective of people just kind of who really want to do it, nothing can stop them anyways. But even if for the uninitiated, there is so many resources out there, so many ways to kind of learn, that I do think that passion is kind of shining through. People figure it out. We actually have a lawyer making games. We have a lawyer that makes music. We actually have engineers or people who drop out of college coming and writing all of our code, artists becoming great programmers. That's really, I've seen most of it happening just through our evolution itself of growing through 100 plus people. The only thing that I would kind of tell myself back in the day is, it takes persistence, it takes time to kind of get it right. That's really the way that I would think about it.
I would love to hear you.
Oh, me? Sorry, I thought it was going around. So I would say that, I always take the view that I don't really want to go back in time and tell myself what to do, because if I did, then probably my trajectory would change and life would be different. It's kind of like the butterfly effect. Because I think whatever experiences we have shape us to where we are today, unless you don't like where you are today, of course, that may be different. But the thing that I would say to someone generally is, especially as a younger person, pursuing something that you think you're good at and that is of interest. And I want to distinguish passion from interest. I feel like, because I have 3 kids, and schools tell them, pursue your passion, and passion is important. But I'm passionate about tennis. Doesn't mean I should have a career as a tennis player, right? I suck at tennis as a professional for sure, but I love tennis and I'm passionate about it. And I think we see this as well with other areas, whether this is video games or whether this is sports or whether this is arts. We may be passionate about something, but does it mean that you are actually right for that? Is it an area that you can have impact and you're good at? The good thing about the gaming industry is that there are many areas you can be in, right? You can be in finance as well. You can be in a lawyer, IP rights. You can be a developer. You can be a creator. So there's many stacks in that area that you can participate in. And so that doesn't mean you shouldn't be there. It just means that you should pursue the area that you know that you have an edge. And for most of us here, I think all of us here, we had one other edge. We were early, right? When you're going into an industry that has much more maturity, more than half the world is playing games, right? India is an interesting demographic opportunity because you have a younger population, and it's emerging younger population. Therefore, you have a larger market. You're kind of like the Middle East as well. So you don't feel the gaming crunch that the rest of the world is feeling, because of the rest of the world, gaming isn't that great for the time being, because you have a demographic crunch the other way. Right, you have less children, declining childbirth. Right, Japan, I think, is estimated to be having 30 million less people in 10, 15 years. Right, that's like entire. Over here maybe it's just a city, but elsewhere, elsewhere it would be entire countries disappearing. Right, so that's the thing. So being early in the space is an advantage as well. And then when you pursue an interest, don't be stuck on where it is, because the journey will meander all over the place and will change whatever direction, and you'll just navigate.
But video gaming in general, entry-level folks who are trying to get into it, yes, they're passionate, they're gamers. They're not necessarily game developers yet, they're not necessarily game designers yet. But are you seeing any gaps? Are there aspects you wish they knew before they joined your companies? I know they would probably not join your companies unless they knew this, but you probably would say, hey, if only these guys knew these 3 things or 2 things, I would hire them. What would those be?
So maybe I'll just add, and then obviously we'd love to hear the panel share on this one. But so the sort of longer term view, and if we saw this with gaming, is that gaming development. And I'm not talking about back end and server, but gaming development is becoming much more amateurized, as in commoditized. So we look at vibe coding as an example. Vibe coding is early, but vibe coding, we think, is going to do to gaming what Instagram did for photos. That doesn't mean that every person who's on Instagram is a great photographer, but it mass amateurized the idea of being in the photography business. And it changed photography from the art and craft of taking a photo to the media of being a photographer. As in, suddenly I had followers, and so everyone became a media proponent. And when you look at the biggest game in the world today, which is Roblox, it's primarily user-generated content. And you're not at Roblox because it's the best-looking game. Right? It's social, and it's basically all user-generated. And when you look at the evolution of Unity, or basically Unreal, right, the tools are making it easier and easier and easier for someone else to make games. So then what is a skill that we need to prepare for? Because it's not going to be coding. That's what we hired 10 years ago. We had to find people who could code, right? Who had to navigate code and write it well. Now, with vibe coding, they can probably do most of that stuff. So you need things that are more creative or empathetic. And so the intersection of arts and humanities becomes much more important. So certain schools emphasize game design, but maybe they go into the sort of math and into the modeling, and that's all important. But what's also important is philosophy, history, because when you think about what are the stories, we're telling stories. So to tell stories, you need to know what appeals to us and what is in our zeitgeist or what is in our cultural memory that appeals to us. Even if you haven't listened something, those archetypes, whether they're hero archetypes, savior archetypes, whatever archetypes, we read them, see them all the time. We need to know what they are, and we need to understand them. And so many people in our industry don't understand it because they're not taught in that, and we have to teach them all of that. And I think this is more important. So as the machines do more of the machine work, we need to do more of the human work, which is actually kind of ideal, I think.
Oh, that's pretty cool. There are like multiple follow-ups on it, but let me talk to other panelists for a second. With what's going on with AI and what's happening in future, one of the way to look at it is, how much, because there are a lot of educators here, right? And they're trying to figure out what do we do in terms of making the students who go through these schools more employable, right? And if we are saying, hey, learning a tool is probably just obsolete now to a certain extent, so what do they teach their students? So, and what's happening in the education space? I would love to hear from Ganesh. How is educational or academia is looking at AI in general, and are you focusing more on fundamentals, foundational aspects of it, so that they become more complete, or are you still focused on specifics?
Okay. So when I talk about the academia, the training industry as a whole, where there are two parts to it. One is the formal education ecosystem which exists with the universities and colleges. The other one, there are many players who are there into the training institutions coming up and doing. Largely, the second category of institutions have been in place for the last 10, 15 years and doing a good job of creating talent. But unfortunately, what I see is large portion of them have been focusing on the tools. Okay, as you said, Yatsen was saying, so it's all about the tools that have been focused more. But I think with AI in place, these tools will probably not have any role much to play in future. Okay, so you just do a prompt and you get everything done from a prompting side of it. So a tool, learning a tool, coding and all those things are slowly fading away. What needs to be focused, at least in the academia side of it, when I say formal education part of it, is where the fundamentals has to be focused. At IIT, when we are working on creating a program, we're just working on it. In fact, me and my other colleague Ramesh is also here, wherein we're working on framing a curriculum for XR, which it touches upon several elements, including the gaming. We are trying to touch the fundamentals. So one of the subjects that we are talking about is maths for XR, or physics for XR. Okay, so that holds good for the gaming industry too. So when a character is created, or when you convert that into an animated element into applying that, okay, so there's a lot of physics and maths which is missing. So those fundamentals have to be touched upon is what I believe in terms of building the skills. Tools can be learned anyway, and we have been using a lot of tools and applications today. We have not been taken to any institution to teach or learn how to use a mobile phone or any of those applications on the mobile phone, but we are extensively using them. Okay, there are no institutions which are teaching, but the fundamentals is something which is need to be focused. And as Yatsen was mentioning it, the history, the culture of the nation or the culture of your society has to be imbibed. Okay, And I believe it's not, we need to start a little more early. Today we are talking about doing it in the higher education space, and now we are contemplating how we can take it to the college education. And of course, there are a few institutions which have done some work on it. I think we need to start even at the level of the school itself. And that would create a much more foundation base there. Okay. So these elements are the ones which I think has to be focused more.
Okay. So Shruti, I would love to hear your point of view on what is the government's doing, or what is the industry doing to fill the skill gap. If because the consensus seems to be, don't teach them anything super specific, but and also keep an eye on future, right? So what is being done in that space?
So from a platform perspective, right, whether it is 3D game engines, Unity or Unreal, one is to train the talent, because people are still you still need a game engine to make your immersive content and 3D content. We lack technical programmers, like game engineer programmers, especially for Unreal Engine. That's always in short supply, and technical artists, right? Because ultimately, what 3D game engines are doing is just getting art and programming tech together. And how do you translate what you're thinking up on a screen? And I'm in total agreement on, it has to be more about storytelling. We need to teach creative storytelling, because that is missing in our curriculum overall. When we were kids, when we came out of college, we were only learning technical aspects. No one has taught us specifically to think creatively. I mean, look at an example of Withering Waves from China, which became such a big game. It became a popular game over the last couple of months. It was a small team. They got inspired by their local stories and local culture, and they've brought it up to life, right? And that is what is needed right now. We need stories. We need because games is a medium of storytelling, as animation or as movies are, and the new generation needs to learn how can they combine all these tools, all the technology, and bring their stories to life. And from a government and from a industry academia piece, I think we're trying to bridge that gap of making curriculums which are more current, and have them at a learning outcome based format, and not just having it as theory, but going out, going to game studios, doing live projects, understanding how a studio works, how a studio environment is. Because what we've seen if you look at the history of the Indian game industry, we've had people like indies who have come in. They've just graduated from college, and they've set up their own companies. That's great, because there's also an entrepreneurial wave that comes into the industry. But we also need experienced people coming in and setting up studios. And I think Zynga has given us great product managers who have gone ahead and set up some good companies in the second generation of our game development history. So it's a combination of all, but it's also, it's easier said than done, because industry, the way tech is moving and the industry is moving so fast, the gap just increases, because by the time we take it to the academia, and academia applies it to their students, one batch is already out. And how do you do that finishing school concept, or the gap, fill up the gap, is again, it comes back, right? So I'm very happy to say in my career, I've done some really good upskilling programs, or bridging the gap programs for the industry. One being at Epic, we did the Women Creators Program, which was all based on upskilling women creators. The focus was on women creators who've been in the industry, in animation, VFX, and games industry for more than 5 years. How do we get them in a cohort together and learn from each other, build a community of creators who could build something together. And we've done that. We have a couple of creators here, all sitting here. I don't see her. Where is she? But yes, it's been an amazing program to upskill it, for upskilling. And on the school side, like what Ganesh was saying, as NASCOM and as IGDC, we've been partnering with the Game Jam Titans, which is actually going to the school level, doing training for a month, and getting students to build something in 1 week. After that, that is experiential learning is the way to go. Till the time you don't play around with tech, you don't play around with something you build, you will never get children or even adults excited, because it's a different scenario of building something with your own hands. So yeah, those are the things.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I think I'm going to try and summarize everything that I heard from it. I'll start with Yat, who actually said that vibe coding actually solves a lot of those things, kind of makes it much more easier to visualize and get something that you had in your mind suddenly on a screen and people are playing with it. That gives people a lot more confidence to start attempting harder things. That's really what we saw. Like I said, we were three of us and a dog. That's how we started our studio. But where does academia come and fit into all of this? About 60% of our company in the early days was just from 2 institutes. There's an institute called DSK, Super Infocom, now Rubica. About 60% of all leaders at Super Gaming come from that one institute, and there's another one called Backstage. But like all of us, we don't credit the institute for producing those graduates, because most of the people that we hired, so people went to the institute, and we would actually see them every Friday. So as a company culture, we would kind of go to watch a movie every Friday morning, because that was the cheapest ticket that you could find. This is early in 2008 and 10. And we would always see these guys there again and again. And we would ask them, hey, are you not in college anymore? And they would say, no, we dropped out. So the next time that we met them, they told us that we started a studio, it's called Dropout Games. And they produced a bunch of games. A little later, we kind of realized that we were doing the same thing. And our company is made up of many such indie studios. Many people who kind of looked at these shared experiences. So I think of like college and think of like campuses or places that people meet or game jams as where people meet each other and kind of find shared experiences. They kind of find, hey, I'm passionate about this. You find somebody else who's kind of similarly passionate about it. There's a shared empathy, because game making is hard. It requires you to engineer a perfect storm. It requires you to kind of bring in the art, engineering, server, and that's really what we found in the creation of our studio. When we started out, we actually had a licensed IP. Hasbro was an investor in our company, and we were actually making something like Candy Crush. So I found that all these guys would make Candy Crush like software in the morning, but in the evening they would make an FPS. And after a little while, it kind of got to a point where he said that, like, chuck it, let's kind of make this. It took us 3 years to make it, and that's really how we kind of created Massgun. Today it has 100 million users, but that's really how we kind of gotten started, by just allowing people to do what they wanted to do. Allowing people to kind of find those shared experiences. Like all of our players put in 1,000 hours into playing Counter-Strike, into playing all of the shooters inside of it. You name the shooter and everybody is passionate about it. Those shared experiences are what kind of brought the rest of the teams together, and that's really how we started making some of those games. I think as long as schools and colleges encourage people to do that while they're in campus and not needing to drop out, I think we'll actually be the perfect place to kind of create this creativity.
Just to add to what you said, today when I see the entertainment industry as such, the large portion of the entertainment industry, whether it is the gaming or the movie industry, there are a lot of dropouts who will come to that. It's probably the problem with the academic system. That's why they are out of that and they're trying to figure out something else. So it's high time the academia should look at that as a space. So I often, when I go and meet the institutions and talk to the management of the institutions, I tell, okay, so the students have the passion to and love towards it. Wherein you need to have some counseling sessions even for the parents to do, bring in awareness about it. All the parents wants their kid to do a BE or a BTech in computer science, and then after that, what? So a TCS, Infosys or something, 3 years there, offsite or an on-site option, wherein you can fly down to US or Australia, settle, and then the life is created. This is what they believe, but that's not going to be the scenario anymore. We've been seeing that at least the last 3 months after Trump come in. Okay, so it's going to be the stay order. Okay, so many organizations have hired a lot during the COVID, and that they thought this is how the technology is going to transform. And the world is going to be in a new normal. Now, we are back to the old normal. Okay, that's become always going to be the normal anymore. Okay, now, those kind of hirings are not going to happen. And we have been, I mean, at least in the last 3-4 days, a lot of articles and Altman talking about AI. Okay, you have agentic AI coming in. Yesterday I was seeing a product on agentic AI. Okay, I mean, entire HR process, the entire L&D process is completely converted to through an agentic AI, and this agentic AI was developed in 3 days. Okay, so that's how transformation is happening. So institutions have to adapt to this model of going into the creative side of it, make the learners encourage more. The multidisciplinary or the cross-disciplinary approach towards these creative areas has to be brought in there.
Can I ask a question? I mean, I think one of the challenges that we have in college is, at least in the US and in most parts of the world, it's a 4-year program. And 4 years in any industry right now is basically almost like 2 or 3 decades, it feels like. And the ability to come out of that position, like certainly when we hire, whatever they've learned technically anyway is kind of irrelevant. And so the value also in relative cost as well, like what kind of, how would you think that universities or colleges or tertiary institutions might have to change maybe even the time it takes to learn the stuff? Because 4 years is a heck of a long time. And usually the first part, at least in our case, maybe the degree matters if you're a fresh grad, but it doesn't matter afterwards anymore. You hire, at least in our case, we hire an experience, what you've done before, and often aptitude tests. And many of them, like my own story, or even my oldest son's story, he basically started working when he was 17 because he has a certain skill. And maybe he goes to college later, but he doesn't want to go right now. I think that is becoming a more common story. How do you think institutions should address this from your academic experience?
Okay. See, that's where I was saying that when we're talking about a 4-year degree program or a 3-year degree program, wherein a person who's studying in the first year, by the time when he comes out of the college, thinks that most of them are relevant. It's the evolution that's happening on the tools, that's where you see a lot of changes and new tools coming into play into the market and things. But the fundamentals remains the same. Today you have the ecosystem of where the people from IITs and IIMs have been produced long back, and they are the ones who are ruling the large part of the US organizations today, the Fortune 500 companies. It's that they have studied about several years. It's the fundamentals that needs to be focused on. The tools can be learned and can be upgraded at any time. Okay. The focus that is missing in institutions, the fundamentals on the creative side of it, not on the tool side. If you learn the tools and then you expect them to stay on to have that tool after 4 years and 5 years, no, it doesn't exist that way. So if those basics and fundamentals and foundations are built, and on top of it, how do you integrate the tools and use the tools? If that is taught, it can stay on.
Do you find, though, that learning can be accelerated as well, though? So if I can create an AI agent in 3 days to do a job, can I basically find a way in which we can so-called upgrade or teach children, or I guess students, in an accelerated manner first as well? So my challenge isn't that the fundamentals shouldn't be there. I totally agree with you, whatever the fundamentals are around the students, all that stuff. My question is, does 4 years make sense, given that everything is accelerating? Because it's social norms that change as well, not just technological and tools. It's how the world is moving. 4 years is a concept that has been around since the Victorian age. So I'm just wondering whether we should consider like a 1-year university degree program. I know that's kind of maybe radical, but just like, we're here talking about the future, so we can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely right. In fact, I consult a couple of companies in Malaysia, wherein, especially when it comes to management. I mean, I was surprised when I saw that they're talking about 8 months of an MBA program, wherein today it is just in India, it's 2 months, 2 years of an MBA program. Wherein, and somebody spoke to me about...
does it in a year.
In a year. So somebody spoke to me about 3 days back and said, can we do an 8-week MBA program? Okay, so
They call these accelerators in the tech world.
Yeah. No, and I think this brings up a great point, right? They like we also need to look at how academia can look at revamping their curriculum and also having multiple entry and exit points, right? Voluntary entry exit points per semester that a student can learn for 6 months, go back to the industry, come back when they want to come and relearn, because that allows people flexibility to say, okay, I'm in charge of how the way I want to learn and when I want to learn. It's like, the newer version of distance learning format where we decided when we wanted to do our semesters, but maybe thinking about and having a discussion with academia, like industry going and saying, okay, you know what, fundamentals are important. The first 6 months should focus on fundamentals. The next 3 months could be around a specific topic, but then you decide, this is the time that a student can exit, go to the industry, do their work, and come back as and when they decide. And maybe that becomes more to your point, right? Because yes, 3 years and 4 years is a long time in current scenario. Things are changing every month, but
So, I mean, like, basically consensus here is obviously, things are moving quickly. But I wanted to first of all share some numbers. I'm sure these numbers have been thrown around a lot in last couple of days. But video gaming, especially, or gaming in general, globally is a $300 billion a year industry, right? Yes, majority of it is made by like the leaders, but that's a big opportunity globally. India probably has like just about 1% or a little over 1% of that market share. So, and other numbers, other stats is they're probably, if you take only game developers in India, they're probably about 15 to 20,000 of us, right? Compared to globally, it's about 2 million or more. So we have 1% of game developers, we have 1% of the market share, but that also says there's an opportunity, right? If you want to capture 10% of it in over next decade or more, we need talent. So while I agree with the panelists here that start early, we need talent right now. So yes, let's figure out, if anybody in the academia here, let's figure out a way to get us more talent. Right now, me and Robbie, we could probably hire 100 more if we get them at the right price and right skill set, right? That said, let's get back into the hot topic AI again.
Shruti is not allowed to say anything about AI.
Jealous. This is a question for Shruti. We've been talking about young professionals trying to get into the industry. But with AI, there is this new hurdle of folks who are already in the industry and the expectation of efficiency from them, right? How does a professional who's been in the industry for a decade or a couple of decades, how do they adopt to this new norm of becoming a 10x designer, becoming a 10x programmer, becoming a 10x artist? How do they measure themselves? What's changing? How do they need to adopt? I would love to hear from Robbie and yet.
You don't need to tell them that. That's something that we've kind of seen. People already figure out the most efficient way of doing it. Whatever they were doing in 3 days, now they're doing in 30 minutes. Many tools exist to kind of automate at least those menial tasks that they were doing for a long time. Once they kind of get into it, they want more of it. So the only request that I've had from my teams is, can I get more licenses? Can I get more credits? And that's kind of something that we've kind of enabled across it, and we'll do a lot more of it as well. Because it's bicycle for the mind. It's kind of taking all those menial tasks, allowing them to go faster, figuring out what wasn't possible and doing that much, much faster. I think you're only going to see more of it in terms of taking people who are already creative, who already know what they want to do. You have this magic genie kind of helping you figure out the most efficient way of doing it. There's no better time for it.
I mean, if I was to try to summarize that, if you could try to hire, and it's not that easy, inquisitive, systems thinkers, and sort of inquisitive system thinkers who are divergent. And that sort of is a really, really tough package to find. And maybe you can train for that. I think the challenge is that the key on using tools like this is now about, it makes it easier for you to ask the question, and you need to be quite accustomed to asking questions, and then to challenge and to re-challenge. And that's actually very difficult for people who have a classic engineering background, because they're trained to be more convergent in their thinking by design, right? I mean, you're trying to build something stable, and you're trying to make sure that there is the one path that ensures that it will always work, versus, well, there's 1,000 paths. It's all going to work this way, that way. If this doesn't work, we go over it. That's very dangerous when you're trying to build sort of a core infrastructure. So I think that's one of the key sort of skill sets that we need. The other thing I want to just quickly share is that most people sort of try to divide people between convergent and divergent thinkers in a way. But there was an interesting study from George Land and Bethany Jarvis back in the 60s, where they basically showed that basically we're born creative, right? And actually schooling and environment sort of takes creativity out of you. And the stats are staggering, right? I mean, children are 97% creative, when they're like 5 years old, effectively, and they become 2% creative when they're adults. They follow that study. You can check it out online. There's also part of the body of work of what Ken Robinson was talking about, the late Sir Ken Robinson. And it kind of asks this question as well when we talk about things like AI tools, whether, of course, you need to have system thinking and you be responsible, but if you have a tool like an AI that actually is your convergent thinker and manages everything for you that way, then maybe we don't need to have conversion checks the same way that we used to have. And when you think about what you're doing, for instance, with Unreal, you're actually creating and making it so easy, relatively speaking. When we were coding on VRML with SGI, we had to simulate everything, right? And here you have gravity, you have things like that. You have things you can tune, but you don't need to code it, right? So I think that freedom, I think, maybe speaks more to who we are as humans, maybe anyway.
This is a question a little bit away from education as such, but I would love to hear your opinion on this, because we're talking about AI and the abundance of content which is going to come people way, right? I mean, yes, there are enough people to consume it, but there's going to be insane amount of amateurish content which is going to come our way. So how do developers who are spending time, are going to invest in building something high quality, distinguish themselves from the abundance out there, right? How do they stand out?
I mean, you look at the topmost creators on YouTube or Instagram, they do stand out. I think that's coming for games as well. So people who understand audiences, who figured out what they want to build, who have a unique story to tell, that's kind of something that we always felt, what's something that you bring to the table uniquely. If you bring that uniquely, there's always people to listen to that voice. Emerson had this quote in which he said that the woods would be silent if only those birds sang that sang best. So we kind of see that happen in this industry.
When you have mass amount of content coming out in a new way, like the Instagram example or YouTube example, new industries and mediums will appear. For instance, who thought we'd want to watch people eat food? I mean, as an industry, which is $1 million industry, right? Or unboxing, for instance, as a simple example. And so I think it's just matters of creative expression. We have so many diverse interests. The thing that I really sort of find great, and I think what AI will solve here as well, is that we can now start to develop games that can really go into what we would have considered niche, but aren't actually necessarily niche because they can explode and grow, right? And the early days of mobile kind of created that. Most people who are not in the industry might not know that in 2009 and 2010, the gaming industry was in a crisis. It was not growing at all. Console gaming was stuck. Nobody was buying stuff because everyone thought using these controllers was just way too complicated. And then mobile gaming came around, and its innovation wasn't handheld. Nintendo did that before. Its innovation was that you could just use a finger. And everyone who wanted to play a game could do so and feel professional and good. And they basically became, it mass amateurized gameplay, actually. That's kind of what that did. And that's how we got to 3+ billion gamers.
Yeah, so I've been told we're running out of time. Hey, that was great. So we would love to hear any questions from the audience, if there are any? Yeah, please go ahead.
What future trends, specifically other than AI, do you see in the gaming and education amalgamation?
Well, okay, maybe I'll start. On future trends, I mean, definitely blockchain gaming, digital property rights is a big trend. But it's not to be viewed purely as a technology trend, it's to be viewed as a social trend. As in, what do gamers want in the end? Do they want to own their assets? If you believe they want to own their assets, if you believe that they want to be able to trade them or do other things with them, then that would be one area. So that's definitely an emerging space, but it's probably the fastest growing space in gaming for the right now, as an industry.
And I think also another future trend would be UGC content, like Roblox, UEFN, all of that, because that will allow creators to come in, build without thinking about how to publish, look for publishers, and also reduce the time cycle of game production, right? You can actually, people are building games, publishing games on Roblox or UEFN within a month or 2 months, and how these would turn to be platforms for quicker game development and publishing. So that would be a big trend. And it's also about merging social integrations, right? Social entertainment aspects. How, if you look at the example of Fortnite, what Fortnite has done in the past few years of brand integrations or celebrity integrations, like the Travis Scott concert or Ariana Grande concert, or even we recently had Eminem doing a concert inside Fortnite. It's about merging real world with the games world, and how can people experience seamlessly. So those would be the future trends coming. And I think students right now, this is a great time to be a game developer or thinking about entering this industry, because there are so many avenues that you have that I don't think so we had when we all started.
I'll kind of add to that. I think one of the future trends that I'm seeing is game creators kind of amassing these huge followers. Earlier games were made by these, no-name companies, large corporations, but you'll now see a lot of very well-known indie games out there. Largely, you look at Lethal Company, Schedule 11, a lot of these small indie teams kind of creating games that are being played all over the world. Mixes, hybrids, Pokemon with guns, Palworld. We have a company where we made a battle royale with 100 people, but within our company, there's one who's making a battle royale with one person. So we kind of see that kind of insane creativity kind of coming in, productivity kind of coming in, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I foresee one area which could be the future, but not immediately. It's the XR side of gaming is emerging. So we would be moving into another phase of it, is where we integrate haptics and perception engineering into the gaming component. So this is probably 5 years or 10 years down the line. You will see the haptic integrated gaming coming in place, and with the perception engineering going to be playing a large role there.
In gaming, there's a chance, it's probably there are going to be a lot more distribution platforms also, just like for video content, there's YouTube, TikToks, Instagrams, and others. There's most probably there's going to be, for gaming also, multiple distribution channels with the content creation becoming very easy. So that's probably is another trend which is probably on its way right now.
I had a question more for the industry, right? I think in general, when we talk about education, we're talking about what the university should do. One of the areas that I see, at least in my experience working with my nephews and others in India, is there is a lack of structured internship approach, right? And where, if you look at the 4 years that my kids went through in the US, almost every single year they were able to intern at some company. But here, until you reach the final year, there's no concept of internship. It would be great, and I'm not here proposing solutions, but I would love to hear, at least from the academia, how you could help students, get into more of that practical training, so that would help them come into industry much better educated, rather than learning just rote learning from the universities. Thank you.
I think there are a couple of institutions, especially the deemed to be universities, have already started practicing this. The learnings out of it is where we are trying to integrate in the new education policy. The NEP 2020 talks about a lot of immersive element. In fact, the curriculum that we're working at IITM as well as we're closely working on building something with Game Developers Association is all. Every semester we are talking about a practical immersion part of it, okay? Because this space of the industry, which is a creative industry, completely needs to have that immersion part of it, okay? And that would be the way forward. I think NEP is trying to do a lot of thing on that particular area. The ASETs, the internship portal that was launched about a couple of years back, and the NASCOM has done something on that, but it's all to encourage this. Okay. We may not have a physical immersion or an internship, but at least a virtual immersion or internships could emerge soon.
Unfortunately, industry is also not as well organized to be able to take in internships, because at the end of the day, all of us are learning as we go. So we have really no idea what to do with interns. So that's a gap, but there is training needed on the industry side to figure out how do we get more, because the unfortunate reality for us is if I'm going to invest my time on somebody, I would rather him join me than leave, right? So the mindset that, hey, we are investing for the growth overall of other people, that's not there yet. But yes, we are all trying, but it's not there yet.
All I'm saying is that I think there should be a government industry movement from either IGDC or institutes like that that can actually create a structured approach, making it easy.
Yeah, so we've launched this initiative called Game Connect, which are hackathons and game jams which happen in different colleges. And usually the winners of those hackathons or game jams are given internship in the industry. So that's something we're trying, early days. But we want to make sure somebody who's already somebody or has shown potential to get those opportunities versus anybody who's like, oh, I'm going to try 5 industry and pick, right? So we're being picky because the industry itself is small, but once it gets bigger, I think we can broaden that. Anyone else?
Yeah. I also have an academia-related question. As Yatsu sir said, that children lose their creativity by the time they're done with graduation and all. So I would argue instead of at a collegiate level, I think we need more reforms on a much younger, even preschool level. And rather than curriculum, I'd say it's more teaching methods. As someone who is a fan of art in general, I think there should be better encouragement to engage with it, because what we're taught is rote learning. Like in English, for example, you're given what you're supposed to write in the exam, rather than asking for, okay, what do you think of this? They're not encouraged to think at all. I think that base level is more, should be more reformed. So what can we do in that? Thank you.
I think institutions have started realizing this. At least some of those institutions of eminence have started working on it. We've been talking about open book examinations basically to bring in that element. I just don't want to name this university, a very prominent emerging university in South India. They have said open chat book. I mean, you can use your Gen AI, any Gen AI solutions can be there and you will appear for the examination. So you can use a mobile, anything, but it's all about the creativity. It's not that you can go and find out and put a prompt and can find an answer. So it is not that ChatGPT alone can give you. You can use any tool. So that's the way wherein we would see this going forward. And I think, again, if you happen to have a chance, look at the NEP 2020, wherein there is a bigger emphasis on open book exams and these kind of concepts already there, which is primarily to bring in that creativity right at the school level.
So I'm reminded a little to your question. I agree with you, but I'm reminded a bit of a question of kind of what Singapore was struggling with. And Singapore is a much smaller place, so it's much more manageable. Where everyone in every Singaporean parent is going to send their kid to college, right? There was just simply no way out. And if you do something like in the arts or creativity at the time, it was like, oh, don't do that. Like you need to be classic doctor, accounting, lawyer, engineer, that type of thing. And then in order to sort of kind of be cool, And I think, and because it's not just about the university, it's your household, it's your home, it's what your parents have expectations with. The prime minister then and a number of cabinet members went out and did a rap song. And you can probably find it on YouTube. And they just decided to go cool, and they were rapping. Some people were like, that's kind of weird. However, it was trying to sort of, and there was this whole commentary about, like, Singapore is a little bit messy. Okay, you still can't chew gum, but, it's kind of messy, and we sort of be creative and so on. But I guess I was just trying to say that this has to happen not just at the university level. It's a societal thing. It's something that broadly has to be said as, hey, and so it starts at the top, like not just the business. Yes, to set a tone as well, to say, oh, maybe that's okay. Right? Singapore was facing a real crisis because everyone was getting a degree, and then nobody was doing the other jobs. Right? So they were trying to sort of figure out how to do that, and that was sort of their crisis. And if you have a crisis of creativity, how do you encourage, as a society, to make creativity cool and to have artistry cool? And maybe, again, not saying this is okay for certain people, but maybe it's okay to have people walk around with tattoos and different hairstyles and whatever. That was not possible in Singapore 25 years ago, and now you have people around that express themselves differently. So it is very much about cultural norms.
It's also, to a certain extent, prosperity. So the generation has to work, the next generation to be creative to a certain extent.
But I think it's safety more and security. This idea that you need to have, like that it's safe. Because when you look at the centers of creativity, whether this is in LA or in gaming, it's like Helsinki or in Finland or in London or even in Japan, their personal expression culture is very deep, right? I mean, it's tattoos, dressing, things, all sorts of stuff. Like, it's very, very expressive, and it's culturally accepted. And in other parts, it may not be culturally accepted. Then it's hard to step out, right?
That's true.
Moving away from a state where necessity was the mother of all invention, today it is imagination. So everything on the imagination is what comes into the world. Okay, whether we don't even know whether it was a necessity for us. So the encouragement should happen from the family side of it. It's not just the academia, the institution alone can. It's the okay. So that's what is required.
Quite difficult. So how India can what can be the timeline? India becoming superpower in gaming industry, like Robbie and Sridhar releasing best-selling games in the world, and what can be the path for that?
So he has acknowledged that it's difficult to answer.
The reality is we don't have to be, right? Why do we need to be superpower in anything? Let's carve out our own niche. Our biggest goal right now is we have this massive market of our own. Let's make content for our market first. Let's capture it. Let's be a leader for our own market first, because the window is very short now. And once we get better for our own market, let's produce content for other markets, right? So I don't believe we have to be leader in anything, but if we just chip away slowly, in a decade or so, we are going to be in the top 3 producers of gaming content.
So, okay.
No. So I think the MC is becoming restless as we are running out of time. Okay, so we can take the questions probably after. Okay.
I just wanted to share sort of the China story here, being in Hong Kong and what we've seen there. Very much to your point, most people might not realize that China actually didn't have a local game economy from locally developed games until maybe a decade plus ago. There's a couple, but really it was all import games. World of Warcraft, like MapleStory, whatever. Like basically Korean, Japanese, American games. But what they had was a demographic advantage at the time, which they're losing now. Young, evolving, digitally native audience. That's what you have here in India. You are the growing market in gaming. In fact, you are the growing market. The other markets aren't growing, right? Less babies, demographic challenges, everything. So how do you protect your industry is what China did, right? Making sure that the government also works around making sure that your domestic industry is protected. And that's the reason why China and South Korea and Japan is more like sort of cultural, has had an edge, because otherwise they would just be literally colonized by sort of, let's call it overseas tech, right? So I think it's a policy framework, right? China had this method of sort of licensing certain type of games that were then done with local publishers. But really what it did was it actually nurtured a local industry. And now, like with Wukong, for instance, so on, you have, games that go global. And the other thing I would also say that, Indian culture, Indian diaspora is probably the only one that's larger than Chinese, right? And it's actually that sort of cultural export that you have, things like food, right? I mean, we have dim sum, you have curry, right? Like it's all over the world. And so the people are already accepting that aspect already. So you already have a pool of international audience you can go after.
Cool. That's a wrap, guys. Thanks everyone for, you guys have been a very patient audience.